Lithium is one of the key critical minerals that goes into the battery production. Also, all future battery generations will contain lithium. And currently, China is controlling 90% of this converter market. Production is still in early stages here in Canada, but there's a lot of potential.
The race to secure critical minerals has become one of the defining economic stories of our time. Governments are rewriting industrial policy, automakers are rethinking supply chains, and investors are paying closer attention to the materials that will power the next generation of energy storage and transportation. And a few companies are approaching that very challenge from both sides of the Atlantic. Welcome to the Market Frontlines. I'm your host, Lyndsay Malchuk. Tech Lithium is building an integrated strategy designed to connect resource development, refining capacity, and battery-grade lithium production across both North America and Europe. And with one of its converter projects ready to go in Guben, Germany, and plans to bring lithium conversion capacity to Ontario, this company is emerging as a key player at a critical intersection of energy security, industrial competitiveness, and the global battery supply chain. And joining me to talk just all about that is Dirk Harbecke, Executive Chairman of Tech Lithium, whose vision has been centered on creating a more resilient and regionally anchored lithium supply chain at a time when demand for critical minerals continues to accelerate. Dirk, it's so great to have you here. Welcome to the Market Frontlines.
Thank you very much, Lyndsay. Pleasure to be here.
Now, before we actually get into the projects themselves, I'd like to start at, a higher level here. When people hear the term lithium company, right now they often still think about mining. But when I look at Tech, I see a company building infrastructure, processing capacity, and supply chain solutions across multiple jurisdictions. So from someone just discovering the story, how would you define Tech today, and why is this much bigger than a traditional mining company?
The lithium is one of the key critical minerals that goes into the battery production. Also, all future battery generations will contain lithium. But lithium has one challenge. It is available in the ground, but it is highly reactive, right? Which means eventually it is very difficult to distract lithium in the right way, to separate it from other metals, and to prepare it in the perfect way that it can generate the best battery energy that we need. So having said this, the shortage in the lithium segment and why China currently is dominating the global market is indeed the conversion to get really the minerals that are coming out of the ground into the pure lithium salt form that is needed to produce the batteries. And this is being done by converters. And also in the future, when you are recycling the batteries, because we will have a lot of electric cars, we have a lot of battery storage that is currently being built up. For the recycling of this, you also need these converters to clean up the lithium again. And currently China is controlling 90% of this converter market. And it's incredibly important for the Western world to set up independent supply chains. There are only a few players who have done this so far, by far not enough. And we grew as one of the key players to have spent a lot of money, to have built a lot of knowledge with our German engineering and our German plant. And because Germany and Canada are really close partners and there are quite some cooperations in the critical mineral sector, we are the party, this is a company that is really predestined to work on both sides of the Atlantic.
Absolutely.
So we decided 18 months ago that we move our German projects also over to Canada. Here we even built a mine in Northern Ontario, very centrally located at the Lake Superior, just north of Thunder Bay. And next to the mine in Red Rock, we are going to build our first lithium converter for the North American market.
That's exciting news right off the bat. I mean, I know that one of the things that caught my attention is that after years of advancing your converter strategy in Germany, you as you mentioned, there's now a very deliberate focus on Canada. So you've described Canada as the place where economics, where policy and opportunity are increasingly aligning. Dirk, what changed over the last few years that made Canada move from being a part of the strategy to becoming such a central piece of it?
What I saw especially, look, the first time I've been really to Canada when I invested in Tech Lithium, it was a very different company.
Oh,
Was in 2012. And already at that time, we have built up the relationship with our partners, with the First Nations locally. And we have monitored the lithium market very closely. It's still a relatively young market and it's a very volatile market. But when a market is young, it is important that you have a full commitment of government and industry to develop this with you. So 5 years ago, we had a very interesting market environment in Germany when the whole German car industry was saying we go fully electric. This has changed, of course. Europe is currently a very challenging market. We still will perform with our project, but it became very challenging. We have a war there. The German car industry is a bit undecided what to do. And at the same time, like 2 years, 18 months ago, in Canada, also with your government change on the federal level with Prime Minister Carney, there's so much commitment to build the regional supply chains, to become the central party as Canada, as a country, to deliver critical raw materials to the Western world. And we see this commitment in all provinces, and especially in our province, in Ontario, where we are active. We get support from the Prime Minister here. We get support from the Ministry of Mines, of course. The processes for getting all the permits in place, yeah, for deciding on your offtakes, etc., are really have been sped up in Ontario in the best possible way. So there is a commitment now that we see in Canada that things shall be implemented. This is very different to the years before that I have observed in Canada. And this, together with the big advantage of the low energy prices, so the industrial energy cost, and eventually we are a combination of a mining, but especially also eventually a chemistry company, because converters are very much about chemistry. We need a lot of energy to get our products eventually done. And when we get low cost hydro energy, that is the best of all worlds for us. And in that combination, we said clearly Canada is a place to be for us.
I couldn't agree more, Dirk. Now, I know that this strategy, I'm going to push this just a little bit further here. That strategy goes far beyond just developing a single asset. And it's something that you mentioned here. You're advancing both the Georgia Lake project and the Red Rock Converter project, creating what could actually become one of the few fully integrated lithium operations in North America. So why was it important for RockTech to control more of the value chain rather than simply just becoming another lithium producer?
We have learned over the past 2 years that it is possible to manipulate markets that are still relatively young, like the lithium market.
Right.
We have seen this. There was a lot of pricing pressure coming out of China. And I mentioned before, China is controlling 90% of
Yeah.
the lithium hard rock conversion. So when you are a controlling market player, you can simply push down or push up the prices. This is a very difficult scenario when you want to be independent. And we learned at that time that it can happen to you, that China is pushing down the prices for the lithium chemicals, but at the same time, the Australians and soon Canada more and more are producing the raw materials for relatively high prices. And then you have a problem when you are a converter that depends on the raw materials, but when you don't have your own source of raw material, when you don't have an integrated project. And because our Georgia Lake mining project, this was actually the core of Tech Lithium when I got involved with the company, right? But the last years, when the lithium prices were so little, yeah, we had put this project officially, when you looked at this from outside, it was more or less on hold. Unofficially in the background, we have done a lot of processing work. We have optimized all our systems. We have taken down our operating costs, our Capex. Yeah, we recently published this also. We will be able, and we are aiming to prove this in a DFS that we are starting very soon, to reduce our Capex that was so far in the pre-PFS shown, to reduce this by 50%. And in an integrated case, you are independent from this world markets manipulation efforts, it's unclear if they are still happening, but you cannot rule this out. And we want to be independent, have a clear, successful business case, earn money on the mining side and earn the money also on the conversion side.
Well, Dirk, I mean, there is a lot happening around the world right now. We are very, very aware of all of that. And I know that a lot of our countries right now outside of China that are dependent on China, they're really starting to stockpile. In your opinion, Dirk, do you believe that Canada has the fundamental stability to really get to the source and the core of what we need to keep it here at home?
The short answer is yes. And what you see in reality is that most of the European countries, and I just came back here, I'm currently in Toronto, and I was at a critical metals conference for defense. And you have quite some German
That was a
representatives
good one.
also there, right? And the
Yeah.
German government and the German development banks, yeah, they are coming to Canada and they are asking Canada to support, to deliver in the future the raw materials to Germany, to the German car industry. And there's really a strong reason behind this. The lithium production is still in early stages here in Canada, but there's a lot of potential. We see this with our current project, and we say it also publicly, that we are aiming to take over more and more projects in our neighborhood, because when you have processing plants, what is normally happening, there's quite an investment behind the processing plant, is that neighboring properties of friendly companies are then coming to us and say, can you also process our ore? And then you make economic agreements with them. And so we also become a much larger producer of the hard rock minerals. Yeah, we also have a clear target to take over some of the other projects and some junior projects simply to increase the size, because we know exactly what will be the demand for lithium in the coming 5, 10, 20 years. And most people cannot really imagine this. When you look at electric vehicles and you talk to people in a bar and they say to you, well, maybe this is that already, are the EVs really coming? EVs are by far the better cars. Even in Canada, where it is a bit more challenging. I know we have a lot of remote areas. We have very big cars here, right? But the battery technologies are now so far advanced, yeah, that you will see in the next generations that are being sold. The cars are simply better and cheaper to run. So electric cars will be successful. And alone at the moment, to service, let's say, 20% of the new car sales market in USA, assuming at the moment these 20% will be fully electric, you need around 5 converters of the size that we are building and aiming to build in Ontario. Yeah, and currently we have none. So, and this is just the start of the business. So there's a huge potential for us, and there's also a huge need. And this is a need that Canada, the politics, but also the companies here have well recognized.
So, what do you think the biggest roadblock right now that Canada is facing to get to that that level of supply chain, conversion or whatever? What is the biggest roadblock that you're seeing here in Canada?
The biggest challenge is always to get the investment and the investment amounts that are necessary on the table. Canada is building more and more funding projects for critical minerals. This is happening. In some cases, these funds are not fully funded yet, so that the money cannot be spent. But what we are seeing, for example, in September this year, Prime Minister Carney has invited for a conference of the Global Sovereign Wealth Funds. So you will have the Qataris, Abu Dhabi, etc., coming here. And if the government is able to convince them to invest in Canada, we are one of the projects where these global funds can invest into. So what we see is the government is really actively sourcing money also from global wealth funds abroad, and these are the guys with the biggest pockets, yeah. And this is extremely important. Secondly, what we see here, as an example, because I mentioned I just coming back from a defense conference, Canada has a very fascinating system. When Canada gives out contracts for any kind of defense, weaponry, submarines, whatever, the company that is getting this contract has to prove that it is creating minimum the same value of this contract in future revenue generation and economic development in Canada. So to a certain extent, with such a concept, you make the defense industry, which is next to artificial intelligence, one of the most flourishing industries currently globally, you make them a developer of your industry at home. And seeing these developments, we are convinced that we are at the right place here because Canada is really significantly supporting in all these funding efforts to get also large projects like our projects in place.
Well, that makes sense. And we all know Canada is just the number one, country in the world. We're just going to do a little shameless plug there. That's for sure. Now, Dirk, the market has also become much more focused on execution as well as economics. So your recent work at the Georgia Lake points to some very meaningful improvements in project economics, while lithium prices have also started showing signs of recovery, finally. So as you look ahead to the milestones over the next, we'll say 12 to 18 months, what do you think investors may be underappreciating right now about the potential of this project today?
Well, at the moment, I have to say the investors do not really see what we are doing here in Canada. We had so far a relatively small team here and we were working behind the scenes. Yeah, we did it very different to what we have done in Germany. In Germany, many investors know us. Yeah, we were very prominent in the media, etc., which is also good. But in Canada, we have not done anything of this. Yeah, we have in the background prepared our projects. We have done the pre-feasibility studies. We are currently now allocating the feasibility studies both for the mining side and for the converter project.
Mm-hmm.
And we just start now to tell the public and to tell investors what we are doing here. I'm personally convinced that we will be the first producing lithium mine in Ontario. When our DFS, the definitive feasibility study on the mining side on Georgia Lake is done, and this is likely by end of the year, that's our target, we aim to get into the final investment decision early 2027. And then we aim to have our mine in production 18 months later. So when you look at this timeline, we are talking about middle of 2028. And this is also important because politicians are investing a lot of money and energy at the moment in building these critical minerals. And it is also our job to deliver. It's good for them that there are companies that can be quick. Nothing of this currently is factored into our share price. Nothing of this opportunities, this possible profitability. And what you mentioned, and thanks for this, we have recently published a study where we were saying that we can reduce our Capex and also our Opex significantly. We have published so far in our pre-feasibility studies that we are producing around 100,000 tons of spodumene concentrate per year. Yeah? When you do this with low Capex and therefore also lower interest payments for the project finance and lower Opex, this means that our profitability is even significantly higher. So the numbers of the PFS are public, right? And then you add what I just said, and then you will see this is a highly profitable project in a market that is permanently growing. On the one hand with electric vehicles, but also with data center backup storage with so-called BESS, the battery energy storage systems, which is the permanent storage that you use for renewable energies, for hydro energies. We use this, for example, in Ontario because we have the concept of peak energy prices that are higher than when you are receiving energy at night. With the stationary storage system, batteries, yeah, you can get your energy overnight, you store it, and you use it during the peak hours during the day. So all of this makes a lot of sense, and all of this is based on lithium batteries. And we have a huge market in front of us, and it will be our task now in the next weeks and months to communicate our story, to show what really stands behind this huge market, because the media are not reporting enough about this at the moment, and then to also present our specific business case, which is excellent in that context.
I love all the momentum happening over there. And I know we've run out of time now, and I'm sure that there is just so much more that we could get into. So please do come back. This topic really needs much more limelight put on it.
I will do so. Thanks a lot for the invitation today, Lyndsay. It was a pleasure talking.
We'll see you soon. I've been speaking with Dirk Harbecke, Executive Chairman of Tech Lithium, trading on the venture as RCK, on the OTCQX under RCKTF, and of course on the Frankfurt as RJIB. I'm your host, Lyndsay Malchuk, and this is your Market Frontlines. And here's something worth considering. As nations race to secure the materials needed for the energy transition, the winners may not be the countries that consume the most batteries. It may actually be the ones that control the supply chains behind them. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.